Well, cool. Well, gentlemen, thanks for joining me today. We have Shawn and Tom from Lehocky Giordano in from Philadelphia, and today we're just going to get to know them a little bit better and ask them a few more questions about our fireside chat, really, with people in the legal industry who are doing fun and cool things. So,
thanks for having us.
Yeah,
it's a pleasure.
Yeah. Well, let's jump right in. So, Tom, let's start with you.
Sure.
So, what first sparked your interest in the legal profession?
You know, my mother came right out of high school and became a legal secretary in Philadelphia, and she ended up working at the same law firm for 40 plus years. So I would visit her, and I'd actually work there during my summers in high school and college, and see these men and women in suits. And I didn't exactly know what they were doing, but I knew that it looked important and it looked like it's something I wanted to do. So from that point forward, it was just an attraction to the legal industry. And obviously, as I got older and understood, exactly what lawyers do and what their purposes are, it was a no-brainer for me to try to get into a field to help people.
Yeah. Shawn, do you come from a long line of
No.
legal professionals?
No, so I'm from Pittsburgh, and like most people who have family roots in Pittsburgh, all my family worked in the steel mill. My dad was a third-generation pipe fitter, and so my uncle Jerry Lehocky, that started the firm, was always just the most successful guy I knew in my life. And I knew every time my dad got hurt at work, he would call Jerry, and all of a sudden things were better. And then, as I was getting a little older, I saw my dad come home from work one day with his mustache iced over. And I looked at him, he never complained, hardworking guy like most union workers are, hardworking people are. I just said, I don't want to do that. And he didn't want me to do that. He pushed, academics pretty hard. So I said, I don't know what Jerry does, but I'm going to go figure it out, and I'm going to do whatever he does. So that kind of led me into, I was an econ undergrad in college, and I graduated early. And Jerry had the firm in Philly. I graduated in December, and I got into law school and went out to Philly to clerk with these guys. And after a few months and a couple conversations with Tom and Sam, decided while the law school route wasn't for me, there was a place for me kind of in the legal field that was unique and different, and I could help people that, just look like my dad, or, going through issues that he had went through in the past. So it kind of felt like I was doing some good for the right people at the right place.
Yeah.
The best part about that story, what I'm not sure he even knows, is I remember getting an email from Jerry Lehocky saying, hey, my nephew's going to come work for us. What can he do? I'm thinking to myself, oh man, here we go. I got to find something for this guy. I heard he played football. I'm like, he's probably not going to be that smart. No offense to anybody playing football. And I'm like, I'll see what I could do. And I think it was after literally like a week, I'd given him some tasks, some things, and then I started giving him a little bit more and a little bit more. And I was giving him some complicated issues with fees. In the Social Security world, fees are complicated for a lot of reasons. And I gave him a project that I thought would take him, months to figure out. And like a couple of days later, he's like, all right, I'm done. What can I do next? I'm like, all right, we got something here. We'll keep him.
So what he didn't say is at that point, he allowed me to not sit in the mailroom next to the fax machine anymore. And literally one of those old high school wooden desks with a wrap around, you put your one arm on. I finally got a cube at that point. So it was an interesting story.
Got to earn that cube.
Yeah, got to earn it. So Tom, so moving back just a little bit. So what was it like when you and Jerry and Sam first really left to start the firm?
Yeah,
how long ago was that? So
it was the date, July 1st, 2010. Essentially, it was our Independence Day from our old firm. But it was. You probably have to go back a little bit further for me to tell the whole story. So, I was 24 years old out of law school. My first job was I worked for the employer or insurance company against injured workers. So I'm a 24-year-old lawyer going to court, and I would go and I would see these guys in court, and it was like the best thing I could say is if you're a baseball fan, it's like when you first see the Yankees in pinstripes, right? It's like there's just something about the pinstripes. You're almost lost as soon as you walked into Yankee Stadium because of that. And I would see Jerry and Sam, and I'm like, these guys look different than every other attorney in this room. I mean, not just what they were wearing, it's how they presented themselves, how they would speak, how they kind of controlled the room. So, I would see that and I'm like, wow, those guys are good. And I would actually go against their firm and get destroyed. And one day, somebody from their old firm asked me if I wanted to join that firm. And that was kind of what I think put my entire life, my working career in motion. Because my first office was next to Sam Pond. And you want to talk about osmosis. I mean, it was just like, he speaks, and Shawn knows this because he feels the same way. You just absorb like a sponge everything they're saying. The same thing with Jerry. And so I had 5 years as an associate working for them before they had asked me to join them as a partner in the new firm. And like I said, it was literally changed my career trajectory. And we haven't looked back since.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And so when you think back to that time, was there ever a point where you were thinking, this maybe isn't for me, or you were all in at that point? You're like, this is where I need to be.
Yeah, good question. And I remember Sam comes into my office and he says to me, Jerry and I are leaving. We want you to join us. Think about it. I'm going away. I'll be back in 10 days. And that was pretty much it. And he left. It was great, And I think I could have given him an answer that day. And it's just no disrespect to the other partners in the old firm. There's just an energy about those two that first off, I felt a connection to them. They were my mentors, but those are the kind of people I wanted to be surrounded with. So it was easy. It was an easy decision for me to make. In hindsight, it was much harder for them to make that decision because they were established partners at a law firm. I was 30 at the time, and although my career was going pretty nicely, it's easier to kind of hitch my wagon to those guys. It was a no-brainer for me.
Yeah. So Shawn, you're coming into this firm, and what's your perspective? Seeing the inner workings of this law firm.
Yeah, I think it was something that I had no experience in. Didn't know what to expect. It was literally my first job out of college. I was working at the firm, and I think what Tom talks about with the energy and the osmosis, it's clear that these are guys you wanted to be around from the beginning, and the mission that they set out to accomplish and helping the people that they're trying to help just was that much better, right? You have great guys doing great work, and allowing people that work under them to grow and thrive. And when I started the firm, there was under 40 employees. So that startup mentality, and what's interesting, and I think they're all like this, but Sam really at his DNA is always an entrepreneur. He's always looking for different avenues and being strategic and thinking outside the box. And that is just, that energy is something that you can't replicate, or if it's not real, you'll know really fast. And that became the DNA of the firm, and I think it permeates down through all the partners, and it's something that we try with our mid-level managers underneath to try to spread out, because no matter what the problem is, if you bring that collective energy together, I think you could accomplish some really great things. So I think for me it was the right place at the right time with especially the right group.
Yeah. And so mailroom to the cubicle. So quickly your career is moving in the direction of this firm. Where did it go next, from that point?
Yeah, so from working in the kind of that internship role, I was hired directly as an operations manager. And from that point, it went to director of operations for the disability department. So Tom and I had grew the disability department into kind of a stepsister practice of work comp that was getting a lot of comp clients that would apply for disability into a nationwide 25,000 active client department that had a lot of bumps in the road. And now looking back, we're so much better off from those bumps and going through what we went through, especially as the pandemic hit, but especially doing it together because things came full circle. So I had some serious health issues for a two-year span that kind of took me out of the firm pretty much completely. And during that time, the disability department, had matured and was running smoothly. So when I came back to the firm, I was in a different capacity and kind of starting our referral business. And at that point, I was named Chief Strategy Officer and developing the referral business, referral relationships. So Tom and I had come, at that point, we were kind of working on different floors, not interacting as much. And then from there, when I finally was on the CEO track, which I became CEO at the start of the pandemic, it brought Tom and I back together because of all the changes at the firm. And while the issues changed at every level, when we came back together, that dynamic was still there and working through problems. And, he's a guy that I can argue with and really hash out ideas, but I know that it's all good after that. We're going to leave arms around each other because we have such an experience of dealing with issues together at large scales that now, even though those issues are much more complicated, doing it together is just second nature. So, I think that's been one of the coolest things that's happened on this track.
Yeah. So, Tom, from your perspective, Shawn comes back into the firm. What was your perspective, or how involved were you as you were thinking about what is next for the firm?
Yeah.
How does Shawn play a part in this? Maybe talk to me a little bit about that time and what were some of the things you all were thinking about?
Well, I think, and I'm listening to him talk, and I'm kind of having like a trip down memory lane here. I think what we don't realize, and we don't really talk about this, is what we were doing in disability in 2012, 2013, 2014, is we were setting the tone for what Lehocky Giordano has become and what it is becoming. Because remember, we're in an industry where attorneys are stubborn and they like doing things the way they like doing things. If they worked in the past, they're going to continue working in the future. And sometimes they're very stubborn to make that change into technology. Well, the Social Security Disability Department back then was this kind of blank slate where we could say, okay, we know we're not going to grow. And you got to remember, in 2010, I had about 1,100 clients. Fast forward to 14, I have 25,000 disability clients because of what we were doing. You can't use your old systems. You can't use your old technology. I mean, you know more than anybody, and expect to have that growth. You have to innovate. You have to see what's happening out in the industry. You have to get help from people. So that's what we were doing. I mean, we were probably one of the earliest, if not the earliest, adopter of Litify, right? We're at the LitiQuest conference today. So we were the first client, and we built that out in disability, and we took it from there. So it's just interesting to think, I think what we were doing was we were setting the table back then. We didn't even realize it. So he's sick, and he's sick for 2 years. And by the way, he underplays how bad and how tough that time was for him. It was crazy, and I think that's a podcast alone in itself, just how he got through that, and even better than ever. So he comes back, and he doesn't need to come back into the role in disability because, like he said, it was at that point, it was really kind of working, operating on its own. It was only logical for him and for us to say, okay, let's kind of move into the 21st century in our workers' comp practice and our referral practice. And for me personally, it was all very similar. Kind of like my work is done in disability. What can I do to help the firm and the referral department and our workers' comp department move? So it was just working together. Yeah. Now, he says we fight a lot, and he's not wrong about that. We don't fight. We argue our points.
Hash it out.
I think it's good that I have a bit of the old school in me, right? Because I still use a yellow legal pad. I'm not afraid to admit that. And he's completely 100% new school technology. Let's automate. You don't need to do that anymore. And I think what we do is we almost have the arguments together so that when we present it to the rest of the partnership, we kind of already know where it's going to go. I've given the perspective of Pond and Lehocky, and he's coming at us with, this is why that doesn't work. That's old school. You need to go here. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so you then move into a strategy role. And what are some of the main first pieces of the business that you started focusing on?
Yeah, it was a lot of spin-off work. And what I mean by that is the disability practice, we're bringing in, 20, 30,000 leads a month to operate on. And the conversion rates on internet leads had shrunk to such a point that it was maybe 2 out of 100 leads would turn into a case. And we have this philosophy that's at our core, and it's kind of our mantra, but it's our operating system of help as many people as possible. Like a lot of places call leads. The right word for them is opportunities and people. So when we were looking at the 98 other people we weren't helping, we didn't want to say no. number one, from a business standpoint, it's a lot of marketing dollars. It's a lot of intake dollars. And two, it's people reaching out for Social Security disability because they can't provide for their family anymore, and they're sick, they're on medication, and they have no money, right? That's the fact pattern that we're dealing with. You want to help that person. So we started a data mining department that looked at the intakes that came out of disability for keywords such as broken back, injured in a car accident, and literally, well, that sounds like a fancy technology solution now. It was an Excel spreadsheet file that we hit Control F on and said, what word do we think they would say?
Yeah.
And that's the root. That was the basis of what then became the referral business. So when I came back, I focused on that part of it, and then from there, once we proved the concept and started having a lot of cases, turned that into a technology solution and a really functioning department that now is even much bigger than our disability department was or is at this time. And then flew around the country and started meeting referral attorneys everywhere, because it's really important to understand who you're sending a case to. And conferences and dinners, and then really got in, as the first Lehocky customer and helping them. We were actually building a competing software and didn't know it. So in 2015, we spent a ton of money to build our own version of a Salesforce instance because there was nothing else in the industry that we could use. And through a couple meetings, and we got connected with the Morgan firm that eventually became Lehocky, and decided, hey, we're going to throw our thing in the trash, and we believe in your mission. We didn't even see a product when we signed on as a customer of them. We knew what they were doing because we were on the same mission. So then my focus turned in the technology side. We actually have a joint venture with a development company that builds software as well in the legal space. So that was the focus pre-pandemic. And then once the pandemic hit, it was refocusing back on the business and understanding, let's look back under the hood and systems and processes. So that was kind of the trajectory of it.
Nice. Now, Tom, when you think back to, so he's talking about data, did it change your perspective on data and technology? Even I think sometimes the fact that the solutions that we create are not always that complicated, the Command F, or Control F in the Excel document. Did Shawn coming in really change your perspective on how data and technology could be used long term?
100%. That's the part of all this that, when you're a young lawyer, the only thing you care about at that time is learn the law, get better, right. Learn the law, keep focusing. And so I think things take back seats unless you come in with either a business background or data analytics. I was a communications major coming out of college, right? So this is easy for me. What's not easy is always looking at data points and saying, here's a trend, here's this, here's that. So yeah, that is why this works so well. And I'm not just him and the firm, right? It's just having, and I think we've talked about this, off camera. I don't think there's many firms that have the C-suite executives that we do.
Right.
And this all is because, Sam and Jerry understood that, 100% we are lawyers and our duties to our clients, but we're also a business. And by the way, getting better at your business is helping your clients. The one thing that I can sleep well every night of my life knowing is that our firm, we believe if you do right by the client, everything else takes care of itself. And that includes money, et cetera, et cetera. Right. So, everything we do, if it produces better bottom lines, great. But it's because we're helping the client along the way. Look at what your program is doing for us, right? It's helping us communicate and talk to our clients in a fashion that we dreamed about it, we just weren't able to deliver it. And what's that going to do? Well, that's going to make our clients happy. And then what's that going to do after their case is over? Well, it's going to make them refer more people to us. So it's going to help our business, but we're utilizing technology to do it. It's a no-brainer. I feel kind of stupid. Why didn't we think about this sooner? But it just wasn't in our face like it is now.
Yeah. Well, I think that when the perspective is on the client, ultimately it does drive really good results for the firm. And I think people can miss that, right? When they miss that was the reason that a lot of times, successful firms, the reason they got into this was for the client. And it's still about the client, just they maybe lost that somewhere along the way.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a piece that, when I first started Case Status, it was this like dirty little secret that, oh yeah, like lawyers hate like talking to their clients. And it's like, well, do they actually hate talking to their clients, or are they just, frustrated and jaded by what the industry has done, which is create this mentality of, grow at all costs. It's about number of people in my face on the billboard and not what it was intended.
I mean, look, as someone who at one point had, like we said, 25,000 clients that only knew me as their attorney, the thing that I could never get past is everybody wants an update on their case. But a lot of times there's just nothing to update, or it's the same, right? And how nice is it to automate a message of where their case is along the way? I mean, so we definitely had thought about this before. We definitely had tried to do things with client portals, but I don't think first of all, I don't think you should be in the business of representing injured or disabled clients if you hate to talk to clients, right? I mean, you're in the wrong business. Get out of it. I hate that I have to continue to give maybe the same update all the time, or maybe say there's nothing changed, or you understand what it takes to go through a file to give that update. So sometimes you don't have the time. I just think technology, in the form of Case Status, has shown us that we can do this without really changing the way we operate. Right? I mean, that's
the key. I think you have to have a system that operates well at its core too. And when the person on the phone is also the person that's doing the legal work and writing the briefs and, submitting documents, that's where the rub comes from, because if the firm wasn't oriented, or at times can't be oriented correctly, which then phone calls become a burden because it stops you from doing what you think your job is. So there was also some learning experiences in how to structure the operations. And while client communication is important, it can't ever be second fiddle to legal work, right? Because we need to there's two things you can do in a law firm. You can have excellent customer service and you can win cases. And a lot of the times they go hand in hand. The information you're getting from the client allows you to build a better case at times, or it stops something bad from happening in a case, like going back to work, signing a termination letter, you name it. So you can't have a tug of war between the two. But you can have a system that allows the phone calls to happen and the legal work to happen. And you can have a system on top of that that allows the volume and automation of the communications to become better, which is obviously, why we're working with you guys at this point, because it was the next iteration of what needed to happen. But I think looking at your business is a law firm as a business is a catchphrase that a lot of people are using now. But the core of that is it needs to operate like every other business our clients are interacting with. Their doctor's offices, their banks. We talk about banking all the time. They have an expectation from all these other businesses. Why would their law firm be any different?
Yeah. And I think, now we fast forward to COVID starting, and all of a sudden the way that legal service has operated for 20 years changed. Some drastically, some not so much, but it really, I think, shook the industry. How did, I'll ask Shawn first, how did COVID really impact what you all were doing?
Yeah, so take a step back. I think what Sam, Tom, and Jerry have done really well is created an ecosystem for things to happen quickly, devoid of ego, and it's what is the decision we need to make today with the data that we have today. And, I get a lot of credit for being a technology guy. These guys sent me to school to get an MBA in data analytics, right? They had the vision to see that needed to be in their firm. So as we were approaching COVID, we were in the Caymans with Sam, talking about business and things that were happening. And we're sitting on his deck, and the report comes out of, it went from China to Italy or something like that first. And hey, if this is out of China, it's probably coming at some point. And that moment, we had, within 4 days, we had a group of 20% of our employees that tested a remote environment completely, way ahead of March ever happening. So we got lucky that we set up multiple gateways, and we said, what would the firm need to do to operate completely remotely, well beyond the point where we were pushed in that direction. And that's because, again, this way of operating and this ecosystem that our firm has, things are getting done quick, and it's not going through the levels. And again, if the client's first, well, we still need to be able to win their case if we're going remote, and we can't shut down. At the same time, in Pennsylvania, Sam made this coalition that brought the defense side, the insurance companies, the judges, and the plaintiff side together in this task force and said, how can we all operate efficiently in a COVID world? So that was happening. I think the system was only down for a week in Pennsylvania.
Wow.
Disability obviously went virtual. So that was the start of it. So from a system standpoint, we felt we were ready to operate. However, and I know Tom will elaborate on this, it was probably some of the hardest decisions we've ever had to make. We were super focused only on growth, top line growth, number of employees. We would go brag at conferences about, we have 60 attorneys now, we have 300 employees. That was the bragging rights, right? And again, the ego that seeps into this industry at times, leads you in that direction. But when COVID hit and we had to make some hard decisions and lay people off, as he says, we never want to be in that situation again. But we also understood what that means. All right, if we never want to be in that situation again, how do we need to operate now? And let's really blow it up completely and say, what are the basics? What are the functions that are critical? What are the functions that are, part-time work? What needs to be fully automated? We had Litify, but we hadn't optimized the amount of automations that can happen, and we still aren't. And, we're not perfect. We have a ton of mistakes. We do things poorly at times, but we identify those problems and work on them. And I think coming out of COVID now, we're still not perfect, but we have a really good system of alerting us to the issues that we have and fixing them quickly. And I think those are the overarching themes that came out of it.
Yeah. Yeah, Tom, as you think back to that time, you're delivering the legal service, right?
Yep.
You're thinking about, now everything's great, we went remote, but it's still change, right? There's still an unknown factor. What was going through your mind when you're thinking, am I gonna have the staff? Were you thinking, am I gonna have the staff members to, to run a legal case? What was happening?
Well, there were so many things going through my mind, and like Shawn said, we were in such a growth mode pretty much from 2010 on. We started. Shawn said he came when there was 40 people. The firm actually started with 18 staff and 6 attorneys, and by pandemic, by March of 20, we had almost 50 attorneys, 250 staff, almost 300 total people. So there's that's going on. Okay, number one, all work is essentially shutting down. We are a work injury firm at our core. We also do disability and referral, of course. But I'm thinking to myself, if people aren't working, they're certainly not going to get hurt at work, which is fine. But they're not. So where's our business coming from? That was number one. And number two, it was, well, how are we going to handle hearings? He gave a really good synopsis of it, but there was a heroic event, and it's Sam Pond talking to the other side of the aisle, the defense attorneys. So you go to I think maybe the biggest defense firm in Pennsylvania. They came together, agreed, we got to do something to keep the system going. And they went to the judges, and we agreed on collectively agreed on a system to do it remotely. So, if that doesn't happen, I don't actually know what's going to happen, because we have a lot of brothers and sisters in the personal injury field who didn't have a jury trial for 2 years, right? But we really missed a week. So, there's just a lot going on at that time. I don't want to suggest that anything good came out of COVID, right? We all know the tragedy that it's been. But if you want to look at, there's a crisis and there's opportunity, I think what COVID has kind of normalized is something that other industries have been doing for a long time, and it's the ability to meet your client remotely, or go to a hearing remotely. We had 50 attorneys at one point because we had to send 50 attorneys to 50 different courtrooms. Sometimes we have to send 3 or 4 attorneys to the same courtroom. That has since changed. The efficiency there, I think, has benefited everyone. It's benefited the defense side because they're not paying for their attorneys to travel they would get billed for that, right? And it's allowing, I think, even the smaller firms to have the head attorneys cover more hearings. I think we were spread thin. We were spread thin when pre-COVID, when everything was live. these are things that I hope never change. Do I think you should have the ability, I'm getting too much into like legalese here, but do I think you should have ability to have a hearing in person if you want? Sure. But I think it should default to being remote.
Yeah.
Because it's the most efficient and effective way to operate.
Especially for injured and disabled clients who have a hard time getting there.
Finding if you live in a rural town, having to drive or find a ride to a disability hearing, it's brutal.
Yeah,
you could do it on your phone.
Right. That alone just becomes a barrier for to not have an equal opportunity necessarily, and just getting to the case or getting to the courthouse in a manner that maybe they're not like dressed as professionally, or all those things can play a part. But when it's when you're on your phone, when you're in a virtual hearing, it's just about the facts, and it's about what the judge says. And
you said something to me a week or so ago. It's like, when's the last time you were in a bank? And I didn't even think about that, right? But I can't even remember the last time. Now, I could go to my bank if I want to.
Sure.
So you can go to a hearing if you want to, but like I want to do everything remote. I want to do everything on my phone. And I think we're actually seeing that now come into the legal side of things, which is great.
Yeah. I think sometimes potential firms who are evaluating case status, they get surprised at the level of adoption that firms will get when they're fully ramped in case status, when they've been on for say 6 months or a year, because they have this perception in the past that, well, no, people, they want to talk to me, they want to be here, and the reality is, we look at all these other industries, and look, those things are important. Meaningful conversations are key. I mean, you need to. There's still a requirement. There's still a need to hire an attorney to run this case, but is there a need to be frustrated at 11 p.m. at night when you can't sleep and not know what's going on with your case? No. And I think, when we think about the ethical duty of care, really that's shifting. Now it's like saying technology has to be a piece of that. I mean, I think it becomes really interesting to start saying, well, what is, and this sounds silly to say out loud, but what is the minimum our clients deserve, right? It's not about giving them the minimum, but if we think, well, what's the minimum I'm going to be okay with at a bank? It's online banking. Yeah. That's the minimum. Yeah.
Of course.
Right? I mean, if I call, though, they still better answer, and now I know what it should look like, right? I have my banker's cell phone number, but I don't need him because I have everything that I need, right? Exactly. And I think if we can establish that this is the minimum, well then we can start focusing on, well, what's the maximum? What does client advocacy really look like? And I think when firms like yourself really start implementing technology at large scale, when you really start focusing on being efficient and driving really, the best outcome for your client, you can really start doing some exciting things. And I think we're going to start seeing a big shift in the industry there.
I think you have to see the shift.
Yeah.
And I think, what led to that should be discussed too. And I think the fact that non-lawyers can't have equity in law firms has stymied the innovation in the industry for a long time. And while there's forward-thinking lawyers, there hasn't been the shining light to say this is how a law firm should look and match another industry, right? So no matter which law firm you called, if that technology wasn't brought forward, or the firms that are using that technology aren't advertising that as a differentiator, there was no B side of the conversation.
Right.
It is, well, every law firm's the same. And I think the onus is on firms like us to say, here's what we're doing and here's what you should expect from us, and hold us accountable to that, because this is what we're selling to you as a differentiated point, because you should be able to talk to us 24/7. You should be able to get a status instantly. You should be able to know who your attorney is at all times, and who, if that's not the person covering the hearing, here's a video introducing the attorney that is covering. And no, Sam, Jerry, and Tom aren't going to represent every case in our firm. It just can't happen.
Right.
But here's the track record of the guy or girl that is. And until firms like us and bigger really promote it as a marketing tool, again, there was no decision path before. So I think now that this is catching fire, and some of the bigger firms are going to have commercials that come out and say, here's our client portal, talk to us 24/7, just like you can with every industry. It's going to really accelerate the adoption moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I think that is so tough, though, from a client's perspective, right? Because I have a good friend, got in an accident, got injured, and he even said, hey, which firm should I go to? I said, hey, here's some great ones. Here's one even in the county you got injured in. Like, it was really specific. And he said, I just went to you know, the big billboard
Yeah.
attorney that has been around for a long time, because I mean the billboard says they always win, right?
Yeah.
So why not?
Right.
Well, a year down the road, he says this is one of the worst mistakes I made, and he laughs because he's like, he was actually on the run from for selling drugs for a long time. So he's had
Wow.
but you know, the point is he's, you know, a smart guy, well educated, and he didn't know, and so that's a tough thing in the industry, is for clients to know. They just assume, unless they've had a case before, right? They've worked with the firm that is good, and you've worked with the firm who's not. It really can change your perspective.
And I 100% agree with your saying, and I think the onus is on us and not them.
Yeah.
You know, we need to, as when you get in a car accident or you have a flat tire, you know what the operating system is. You know what you need to do, the steps that go into that when you have that issue. You need a lawyer hopefully so few times in your life that it's never thought about, it's never talked about. And that's why kind of our mission is helping as many people as possible proactively, making them understand, engaging them in unique, creative ways that are not just a lawyer pointing at you, we'll get you money. Well, that doesn't mean anything if they don't need you.
Right.
But, you know, having a video that explains, if you get in a car accident, here's what you do. If you're hiring an attorney, even if it's not us, here's what you should look for. And communication being one of those things. But that's the onus is on us to educate them. And I think so few lawyers really look at it the other way around.
Yeah.
It's on the client should be picking. Why is he not picking me? I have my face here and I'm pointing and I get them money. Again, is that putting the client first? And I think, you know, that's really what it comes down to. And technology aids in that. But at the end of the day, it's about educating that person and putting them at ease at one of the toughest times of their life.
Yeah.
And that really has to be at the fore focus. The biggest advertiser can be a great firm at times. You know, we do a ton of advertising, if they also do the other important things underneath of it. So, you know, your cousin had a case and told you to call the guy on the corner. You know, your doctor tells you to go to somewhere. There's a ton of, I mean, we were talking about attribution models for cases and where do our cases come from? Everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Everywhere. And, you know, there's still that one-off conversation, but I think we're at a time now where, you know, reviews and referrals and things like that are normal, right? If I'm going to a restaurant, I look up the reviews before I go. Well, if you're looking for a law firm, my suggestion would be you should look at reviews and talk to people and say, did they communicate well with you? You know, there's a multiple facts that go into winning and losing a case, right? And a lot of the times that's on the attorney, but sometimes it's not. You know, you get a certain judge, your medical records have pre-existing conditions. A lot of factors go into it. But being guided through the process is what's important. And if that law firm's not going to guide you through that process with bedside care that a surgeon would if you had big surgery coming up, or an oncologist would if you had cancer, the oncologist and your lawyer should be operating the same. Should be having the same hard conversations. They might have to give you bad news, but they're going to do it in a way that's not, let me get to the next phone call.
Right.
You know, it's life or death. And our cases at times are life or death, especially in a financial sense. So picking a law firm, we need to put our industry needs to put more onus into that.
Yeah. Tom, as you think forward, how far ahead are you all looking when you're thinking about how the legal industry changes and really maybe how you as a lawyer, you know, changes over time?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. We, you know, at Shawn Lehocky, we have our, you know, our 1 year plan, our 5 year plan, our 15-year plan, and obviously that's going to change along the way. But we
Could have
always
exactly right now.
You know, what is Sam's sister-in-law always says, you know, fail to plan, plan to fail, right? So we're always planning, and obviously we're going to pivot here and we're going to pivot there. I think the second part of your question was, well, where do I see the
Where do you
industry?
see, you know, as a practicing attorney, how do you see that shifting, or maybe not shifting over the next 10 to 15 years?
Well, I think what's interesting, things are going to continue to change. I mean, look, change is inevitable. We're going to evolve. But at its core, you know, what Shawn just spent 5 minutes talking about, it's people they obviously want at their destination, they want the highest possible value for their case, right? I mean, that's at the end of the day, that is the destination. You need to go to an attorney who's going to maximize your recovery, but it's that journey along the way that we have to make better. And I don't think that's particularly like innovative. I just think it's like it's like what people have been doing for centuries. You just have to make sure you have good bedside manner, make sure you're communicating. I think it all starts with laying out expectations early too. It's something that hasn't been said yet, but it's so important. And it's educating, I think, kind of where you were going. This is what your case looks like. This is what the life cycle of your case. Here are touch points. And, the way if we can continue to use automation and use kind of technology to bridge gaps, I think we're going to be perfect. Do I think it's ever going to be a scenario where they have no human interaction whatsoever? He might, because he talks about this a lot with self-driving cars and robots. I don't know. But guess what? I'll tell you one thing, what Shawn Lehocky will do, if that's where the industry's going, then we're going to, go along with it, but make sure we're never going to compromise our integrity and values.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
it's kind of, I guess the easy answer is we'll see, but we're not afraid to change. And I think that's probably the biggest issue I see with some law firms. They're so hesitant to change because of some prior success, and that's just not the way to look at it.
No, I think you're so right. I think when we've talked in the past about, there are only, so many cases, right? And there are more firms.
Yeah.
And we've even gone as far as say, well, do autonomous vehicles change the number of, injury cases? Well, so now we're even talking about that. And so firms have to change, especially I think COVID highlighted that. But I think, we're going to go through an immense season of change. And I think the firms that are able to adapt, I think, are going to be better.
So on our 15-year plan, we have various different scenarios. But there's scenarios on there that have no more work comp cases, no more auto accidents, because everything's 3D printed or automated. And, it's not that those injuries won't still happen, but they're not comp cases anymore. They're not motor vehicle cases. They're products liability cases. The car is responsible for making the decision that caused the accident now. Right. So we are trying to focus on, we're both young. We want to do this for a long time. And we want to do what Sam and Jerry have done for us, and that is make this a generational thing.
Right.
Leave the legacy of the firm in great shape, just like Sam and Jerry are planning 15 years out. It's easy for them at the end of the career to just, keep doing what they're doing and being successful, they don't care about that at all. They focus on succession planning. They focus on what the future of the firm is going to be, making sure that we are going through the right steps to make the hard decisions on our own and, use them for guidance and things, but really setting the firm up for the future. And we need to do that the same. So we need to see what are the new emerging case types, mass torts, products liability, environmental claims, people are still going to walk around, maybe, at least for the near term. So slip and falls. Think what is going to happen if there's no more work injuries, no more car accidents? What does that world look like, and how do we fit into that?
Yeah,
we've seen it already in workers' comp. It's just job sites are getting safer, less accidents, and that goes back to your initial point about the data. We've seen it in the data in terms of claims that have been filed every year and how they're kind of decreasing. So I just think it's important. There's no, you were talking about Sam and Jerry and the 15-year plan. There's no autopilot. They can easily go on autopilot at this point in their careers, and it's not how we operate. It's not in our DNA.
Yeah. Well, I think back to, you talking about, being a firm that stands the test of time. It's what does the name represent, not as who are the, who's the person whose face is on the billboard. It's, well, what did it mean for the clients to work with that firm and the experience they had, and not necessarily with any of the managing partners, right? An associate who's new, fresh out of law school, but they say, that was a great experience. I knew what was going on. I knew they had my best interest at heart. I knew what was going on in the process, and the settlement was exactly what I needed. That's the experience that you want to be able to create.
I've said this to Sam and Jerry personally, and I look at my role in the firm as someone to make sure that those values that they kind of espouse to all of us continue for generations to come, right? So, and his job as well. I mean, and what's starting to kind of be cool for me to see is that we have Sam's son Dylan Pond now as our chief investment officer. Chloe Lehocky she's going to go to law school, I think. And I have 4 kids, so one of them better be a lawyer.
Roll the dice there. I got good odds.
But this is a family thing, but this is more than that. And what has been amazing is the fact that this little family thing that started in Philadelphia 12 years ago, we've successfully represented clients in all 50 states.
Yeah.
I think we had a disability
countries.
win in Guam.
Yeah.
And we've probably been responsible for putting more people throughout the country in the hands of really good lawyers in their area than most firms can ever dream of. So, we're doing all these things, and it would just be so foolish for us to not have a plan to how can we continue this for generations to come.
Yeah. Well, as someone who grew up in Pennsylvania, I holds a special place in my heart. So appreciate the work you're doing, and thank you, gentlemen, for joining me today. And we'll get back to the festivities at LittaQuest.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Absolutely.